Hey everybody, this is Perch, and I am late in doing this. I should have had it up yesterday, but life happens. Things go on. Thank you for everybody who's patient. I know that cutting back to 2 videos a day, it's crazy. It's like so much free time. That's not it at all. Anyway, Future State had 7 issues this week. So rather than do an issue by issue kind of review, we'll just talk about kind of what happened this week and kind of give you a sense. As always, some spoilers, but not too many. And this is my view. Your mileage may vary and will vary. I'm sure it will. In general, I felt this week was overall a little weaker than the week before. There's some titles here that seem to be a little bit more not meaningless. That's too harsh a word, but they seem to be a little bit more lost. And in particular, like Superwoman and Robin Eternal. Both those and some of the backup stories, they felt like filler. They felt like, typically speaking, like what you'd get out of an annual these days. You remember back in the old days when we were back in the olden days, annuals used to matter. Big things would happen in the annual. It'd either be a big kind of line event, like you had the Evolutionary War or stuff like that, where the annuals would actually sum up to a bigger story. Or there'd be big kind of moments. Uncanny X-Men, the annuals usually had some pretty big moments, would introduce some villains. You had some wonderful character moments. Today, the annual feels a little bit more like these are stories that we commissioned that we're not sure really where they fit, so we'll cram them into an annual. I always get that feeling when the annual has like 4 or 5 stories in them, usually one bigger one, a couple smaller ones. It's like, were these tryouts for new creators or kind of what was going on here? This week felt more like that, where Future State was concerned. But going through them kind of one by one, the big promoted book's probably Dark Detective, and this had 2 stories in it. It had the first kind of a Mariko Tamaki Bruce Wayne, and then it also had Grifter by Matt Rosenberg. I'll say this on the offset, and this is so you understand where I'm coming from. The Magistrate and this police state Gotham, I could not care less about. It feels very, very tired from the first page to me. I'm supposed to be excited about it. I'm very nervous if this is the big overarching plan that we're going to lead to with James Tynion and everything else for the next several years. If this isn't where it should be going. Please don't have it go here. The idea that there's some kind of new pseudo-fascist police crackdown on vigilantes kind of thing, I just don't want it. I feel like it feels tired from the offset. Now, this Dark Detective story, it's doing some unique things with the lettering. I like that. There's a little bit to kind of separate it. That's kind of cool. Very much cyberpunk kind of future. It is, it's fine in and of itself, but ultimately the story comes down to Bruce Wayne was injured and people thought he was dead, but now he's kind of starting back up as Batman again. And the Magistrate knows this, and he's got to fix his mess. And, Wayne Enterprises, Batman, My Technology, My Justice, it's what helped build the Magistrate. So he did something wrong, went too far, got a police state moving. His tech was co-opted by somebody else, or maybe Luke Fox's tech through him was who knows? But that's what we've got. So, as a story, fine. This isn't the worst thing Mariko Tamaki's written. It's not the best thing either. It just kind of is. The Grifter story here, that one was funny because I swear this comic felt like it just would not end, and I don't mean that in a good way. This comic, you got Grifter kind of running around, but nothing that really felt like Grifter. It was just kind of random guy runs into Luke Fox, and he is got to escape some people after him, and it's nothing. Unfortunately, nothing here felt unique or relevant to the character or any of that. It just it just kept going. It felt like it just kept dragging on and on and on. So kind of a tough issue. I felt like average to poor for Dark Detective for me. We get to Green Lantern. Green Lantern is kind of the opposite. I think Jeff Thorne said he was doing something different. and he delivered. What was a surprise to me is Tom Rainey has been, he's a good artist, but he's definitely, I've seen his stuff work and not work in different places, and it definitely worked for this. I think it was a good story. The funny part about it is, if one of my favorite stories is the Legion 5 years later. That was back from I think it was late 80s. And this was a Legion of Superheroes where they did a time skip, and then everything was broken and everything else. And this had really that feel to it. It definitely had that feel to it. So that's gonna win me over, because I really like that series. I like the premise. The rings are not working. They are kind of on their backs. They're scrambling a little bit. I love that the Kuns are the villain here. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. I never have really figured out. It always sounds like I'm saying a dirty word there. But I like this, the God in Red Seas. I like the kind of the new mythology we're doing with them. And I love the fact that, and this is key, we're seeing a very different world. We're seeing a very unfamiliar environment for the Green Lanterns. They're unsettled. Things have changed. But, and this is the critical part that worked for the Legion 5 years later storyline, the villains, the Kuns, all this that they have here, what they're doing with Njort, and just the various characters, these aren't brand new aliens we're supposed to suddenly start caring about. These are recognizable faces in the DC universe. So what's happened here is they are known entities that have changed, and the question becomes, how did things change? How did we get here? And that's a good question to have. It sets up a mystery. It's interesting. When a lot of comics and the other comics in Future State are doing this, when they set up this kind of the future and everything is different, they always introduce random new characters, random new aliens, other things. And so in addition to everything being different, we also have a bunch of new faces to figure out. So you wind up not caring as much because it doesn't feel like it matters. Here, we recognize what's going on in the comic. We recognize some of these characters, and we want to know, how did we get here? And that is a big deal. That's what makes it work, is that this doesn't feel like random alien fight, a bunch of Green Lanterns who do not have rings. Jeffrey Thorne said in the interview that somebody made the comment that it was like Halo. I get why, but it's not like Halo. There's very much, it feels like there's some big stakes, some people, some people getting killed apparently. And so this one has the best hook for me, one, to see where it's going within Future State, but also how do we get here within Green Lantern. So I thought that was great. The two backup stories were good. I think the Jessica Cruz one was okay. I mean, it was good. It was like it had an Aliens feel to it, which I think was somewhat by design. I'm always a little skeptical of the idea of somebody without powers can take out people with powers. That's a little less believable. But they were fighting on her turf, so you get a little bit of that. And I do think the Sinestro Corpse kind of thing at the end there with Jessica Cruz, and the fact that she's fought fear and now she's, there's a hook. That's a good hook. It's an interesting hook. The Guy Gardner story was a little bit more, a little bit more forgettable in the sense that, it's talking about something that happened with the world and all the rest. But what was interesting about both of these backup stories is they were both relatively short. They felt like backup stories, as opposed to others that they didn't overstay their welcome, is probably the best way to put it. So even though like the Guy Gardner story doesn't accomplish too much, but it's not spending 22 pages trying to not accomplish too much. It's telling a basic story in the appropriate amount of pages. I mentioned Superwoman. This comic was very peculiar in that it just, Crypto has died. Apparently, there's a moon colony, and it talks a little bit about how she got here. But this is kind of the exact opposite problem of what went on with Green Lantern. Of like, we introduced some new aliens, some new things, and as a result, it's hard to care about the outcome of this. We get kind of a bunch of stories here, but it doesn't go anywhere. The whole story is kind of building up to this idea that Supergirl is going to start using her powers, and this betrays kind of a promise of letting go of her anger and other things. But it's just this is like, it feels like a classic annual story of, of what's going on. The mystery of why she's on the moon and all the rest is just less interesting, of what they're trying to do. In some cases it's a pretty-ish book. It's got a lot of kind of pastel-y colors and other things, but it feels like if you didn't pay attention to the story, it wouldn't inherently matter in the long scheme of things. That's always tough. I want those stories to make some kind of impact. Justice League. This is probably, in my mind, I think Green Lantern was the best book. This is probably the second best one, in the sense that you get introduced to the Justice League, you get some sense of kind of some threats. I didn't love the idea that, hey, here's the Doom Patrol, now the Doom Patrol's gone. I do think that, the art on the book, who is Robson Roca, you see a penciler and an inker, and it's interesting how the quality of the book just looks more tight as a result. But we don't learn a lot about the Justice League. Most of this is kind of investigating a mystery. They go to a little bit to the well too much about how our far sector Green Lantern here is is an amazing detective, best crime. I wish comics would refrain a little bit from in comic compliments over and over and over again. It's like, we get it. You don't need to keep hammering that point. The Yara Flor Superboy relationship, it feels like the backdrop here is that the Justice League made a promise not to have relationships and fraternization outside of the league due to problems that occurred in the past. And it feels like this book is hammering that maybe a little bit more than they need to. It's okay, what's going on here, but it basically sets up for, some mysterious, members of the Justice League attacking each other. What's going on? Seems like there's some imposters, and that all leads to a pretty cool reveal that dates back to Morrison's Justice League and White Martians, and I like that. I like that tie. That was a nice little surprise and kind of what they're doing. So it'll be an interesting little story. The Justice League Dark story afterward, again, is fine. It's a solid story. It's funny because it doesn't really miss a beat from what we've seen in the Justice League Dark in general. And this feels like a classic case of, did they need to do, this story doesn't benefit from Future State or really matter for Future State. It's just, you could have thrown this out in the regular comic, the Justice League Dark comic, as like a glimpse in the future, like they used to do. The Future State aspect of it, doesn't really matter a whole lot. But it's a fine story. It's nothing wrong with it. If you like Justice League Dark, yeah, you'll like this. It's there you go. Robin Eternal is, again, what's interesting here is that if you liked the Robin comic book from, I think, the 90s, it does give me that feel again. I will say that this comic reminds me of that very much, but this is another case where it feels like a Convergent style book. Unclear of how some of this matters. Yes, you do get Stephanie Brown, spoiler, with an eye patch, and that's fun, and you do get some mysteries about kind of the some Lazarus Pit type behavior and different goo that's running around. So it's a relatively straightforward little adventure. Again, set in the backdrop of the Magistrate, which I feel like it definitely drags the story down a lot. This is a case where this 2 books of the Magistrate in 1 week is 2 books too many. It feels like that aspect to the story really hurts it, where it would be a stronger story if it didn't have it. And whenever you're going to do these comics, like you go to the well too much with a dystopian future. It's why the Green Lantern story, with an uncertain, violent kind of future, it worked. It felt fresh. It felt good. Whereas Dark Detective, Robin Eternal, even to some extent Teen Titans, which we're getting to, it all feels like just grim dark for no clear reason. We get to Superman and Wonder Woman, which I think is probably the worst Yara Flor depiction. And it does start to, we're now 2 weeks. This is week 2 of Yara Flor's introduction. And last week we had Wonder Woman, which seemed to go down fairly well. And then she's again featured fairly prominently in Justice League, and then again in Superman, Wonder Woman. So 3 comics over 2 weeks, kind of bringing this character in. The tough part is that the personality of this character seems to be wandering a bit from comic to comic. And this one seemed to have the toughest role of it. John Kent looks weird. I'm just gonna say in this book, nothing against the artist, but they seem a little bit undetermined about how bulky to make him at various times. We do this infamous what people were complaining about, where Yara Flor is going to tackle Brazilian politics, and you don't really get that. It's basically there's some crap in Brazil about the roads are clogged, and there's some government officials are flying around in helicopters and not basically embezzling from the people, not being disconnected from the people. I mean, sure. In the grand scheme of things, this isn't some big woke political take. It's just, it's classic, like rich guy, poor guy kind of stuff. We've seen that forever. It's fine. It is kind of jarring to see Yara Flor doing this, but why not? So we get some action with some gods. We get a little bit of a back and forth with Superman. Again, this comic once again just feels like it wanders a little bit. As I mentioned, it was very distracting. Superman's face goes from being super tiny to big. Like there's some definite distracting pieces there. But we're kind of getting the relationship between Yara and John, and it's all right, but I don't know. It's this comic seems to have a lot of dialogue that really doesn't get us anywhere. There's a lot of conversations back and forth that don't seem to accomplish too much. And then the hook at the very end is intriguing, but again, it's hard to. This was the weakest of the bunch where those characters are concerned over the 2 weeks. Finally, Teen Titans. And Teen Titans is basically telling a story of, everything that the Titans Island has been destroyed. Some bad thing has happened. A bunch of people are dead. Donna Troy, Wally West, Matt Price, a bunch of characters are dead, and it's bad news. And the story is told in flashback for half of it, to kind of what led us up to this place where the Titans were trying to build a Titans Academy or something along those lines, and it went wrong somehow. They had a betrayal or a mistake or everything else. It's a mess in the sense that this comic has a lot of different pieces going on. It feels like one of those Elseworlds amalgam type books where we're just mashing a bunch of things up together and hoping it sticks. You see a lot of people in this. I mean, you've got Bunker, nice to see him again. You've got, Crush. You've got Shazam, Captain Marvel. You got Raven. You just got. I mean, there's a long list of people, and then it ends with, Nightwing putting on the Deathstroke mask and the Red X being released from jail-ish or. Not sure. So anyway, okay. This comic I like the Titans from old, and I'm interested in these characters, but this is it's a little bit too much of the things went wrong, what went wrong, lots of monologues, and hard to get really excited about all this. It goes a little too wacky to really establish itself as anything. So overall, the books this week felt a lot more, the part of the going into Future State was always like, hey, some of these stories were commissioned as part of the G5 kind of initiative and everything that was going on. And then this is DC basically finding a second life for them, being able to print them without fully committing to the bit. And so we're reclaiming some of that money we've already spent, and we're getting some comics out there. And that they're future takes that may happen quickly, may not happen for a long time. And even though DC won't say it, may never happen. If some of these stories bomb, like are people going to be itching to know how Superwoman got to the state she's in Future State? I don't think so, but who knows? I think some of these futures will never really play out. Is my point. There's some highlights. Like I said, Green Lantern. I got to hand it to him, and I feel bad saying this. Like I don't. Jeff Thorne did a great interview, and he was really forthcoming. And I don't want to sound like I'm kissing up to the book for that reason, because I am not. But damn it, if he didn't produce the best book of the week. And he did. Justice League as well is probably your second. And then I think you just got to get a lot of average stuff. I mean, nothing here is terrible. It's just kind of there. That's the problem. It's just, you're not, you won't pick up any of these books and just be like, oh my God, this is the worst hell imaginable. The story's probably weakest. Like I said, Superwoman's probably weakest. Robin Eternal, just not a lot goes on. Superman, Wonder Woman had probably the worst Yara Flor depiction of the different ways we've seen her so far. And that grifter story in the back of Dark Detective is painful. But again, nothing terrible, just nothing inspiring. And I'll leave with this too. Well, not nothing inspiring. Like I said, Green Lantern has a hook. Like if the second issue here can deliver, and whatever this ongoing series kind of marches to this point, I have to say I really liked Legion of Superheroes, a 5 years later storyline, and this giving me memories of that is pretty. My hat's off to him. He pulled it off, and I do appreciate the nod to both the past and what he's done. I think that's great. One thing to note with these comics is that the DC kind of rolled these out as just comics. It's like, hey, it's here's Future State. It's this week. Here's some Future State comics. But it becomes tough when you're reading things like Dark Detective or Green Lantern. They are bigger. These are annuals. I mean, they in the sense that they are bigger. You're getting a lot more comic for them. You're paying more too. But these aren't just one-off. These aren't just monthly floppy comics. There's more to them. And I think if you go into it thinking that, like I went back and I read the Grifter story a second time in isolation, and I enjoyed myself better. Reading it all in one go with Dark Detective and then Grifter, it started to wash out. And I think if you treat these books like you're getting a number of different stories, you'll enjoy them better. Same thing with the Jessica Cruz story and the Guy Gardner story. It's read them in isolation. They tend to read a little bit better. If you just, power through the whole comic, it starts to feel more meaningless, especially when you have a really strong anchor story like the Green Lantern story. Then you get to the other two and you're like, well, this isn't as good as the first one. And that's not necessarily fair. They're not written by the same person. They're not intended to be. They're backup stories. And so I think if you think about them more like annuals, you probably have a better time. Anyway, there you go. There's Future State. 7 comics this week. I think by all accounts, unless people are really determined to hate everything, this Future State thing is working out better than what people feared. Than this is going to be the horror upon all horrors. It's not that. We haven't, we've seen hints of real gems. I think I think Yara Flor, Swamp Thing were probably the heroes of last week. This week it's Green Lantern and Justice League. Those are books worth reading. I think those 4 are, you're going to get a good story and everything else. But if you happen to like some of these characters, you like Grifter, you like, Stephanie Brown or whatever, you are getting some of them. And so probably you'll get some enjoyment out of the stories where your favorite characters are considered. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below how you're progressing along with all this stuff. And like and subscribe. Follow me on social media. Send me a mail. Fair as fair does. Thanks for listening.